Welcome, welcome to the Slow Food USA Holler for Collards in the Kitchen session. We haven't had too many Slow Food Lives this year, but we're so thrilled to be having another Slow Food Live that features one of our amazing plant-to-seed crops that we are featuring this year. I'll let some people come into the room, and maybe as you're coming in, you can hop into the chat and tell us how you like to prepare collards and where you're from. And if you're growing collards, have you gotten a frost yet? Have you been able to taste your collards with the beautiful, tender sweetness that they get when they get kissed by the frost? We'd love to hear all about how you engage with collards. This is going to be an amazing conversation today. I'm so glad that all of you have joined us to revel in the world of greens. We've been really highlighting greens a lot this year. They're super powerful, delicious, they're climate friendly, and there's so many communities that like to celebrate them. So this is one opportunity where we can dive into some communities that really identify with collards and are spearheading the propagation, I guess is what I'm trying to say, in proliferation of collards all over and different climates as well. So I'm so excited to have you dive in with us today. For people who aren't familiar, Slow Food Lives were created as a way to bring slow food into homes when the pandemic began, and it ended up being a really valuable way to share culinary skills, stories, and recipes. We have a great archive that can be found on our website. We'll be dropping links into the chat as we go along for relevant links to all the things the folks on the session are going to be talking about today as well. Slow Food USA is a membership-driven food justice organization. We strive to create a world where all people can eat food that is good for them, good for the people who grow it, good for the planet. And we cultivate nationwide programs like Plant to Seed that I mentioned earlier. And we have a network of more than 80 local chapters who host educational events in their regions across the country. We also have advocacy campaigns, and we like to build solidarity through our partnerships like the Heirloom Collard Project and Utopian Seed Project as well, like we did this year. Let's see, let's welcome all of you into the room to our eagerly anticipated Slow Food Live. This is done, as I mentioned, in collaboration with our partners here at the Heirloom Collard Project and Utopian Seed Project. And as I mentioned many times already, today we're featuring the glorious collards. I'm going to introduce folks by name, and then I'm going to hand the baton to our friend Chris Smith, who will be our host for today. And then any questions you have for us, you can drop in the chat. We'll be moderating in the background. Feel free, if you have any tech issues, let us know as well. We can handle those on the back end. But in the meantime, sit back and enjoy this wonderful conversation with our guest, Chris Smith of the Utopian Seed Project, Bonnetta Adeeb, Heirloom Collard Project in Ujamaa Seeds, and Gabrielle Eitienne, who's our culinary expert today, and also does a lot of revival suppers. And I'm so excited to have her as our chef panelist today. We also have Spanish interpretation as well. Please select the interpretation globe, and I will turn it over to Tapacio to welcome you to the room as well.
Bienvenidos a todos. Este evento tendrá interpretación en español. Si requieren del servicio al seguir este mensaje, terminar este mensaje, por favor busquen el globito abajo de su pantalla, seleccionen el idioma de español para poder escuchar la presentación en español. También si están en un dispositivo móvil, pueden seleccionar los tres puntitos arriba o abajo de la pantalla y seleccionar el idioma español, la interpretación en el idioma español. If you are watching this and you prefer the Spanish interpretation, it is available at the bottom of your screen. Shortly after this message, you will see a globe with the Spanish interpretation availability there, and just select the language Spanish. If you're on a mobile device, you can select the three dots where you will see the globe for interpretation. Select that and select Spanish. Thank you.
Thank you, Topacio. All right, Chris, I'm going to hand the mic over to you. Let's get started with this awesome conversation around collards.
Yeah, super exciting to be here. Thank you. And just seeing all the people coming in the chat window from like all over the country, which is also pretty fun. I just wanted to start off with a quick overview of what we're going to try and achieve today, and then we're going to jump straight into it. We've only got an hour with you, and all of us have spent many hours speaking about collards and want to make sure we get covered what we intend to. So very briefly, we're all part of a project called the Heirloom Collard Project, which is a kind of a collaboration of lots of different collard loving people that are really aiming to get a whole bunch of diverse seeds that we're going to talk more about into the hands of communities and people and farmers and chefs, and really everybody should be eating more collards. And so we're trying to get these old-timey varieties into the communities where we believe they should be enjoyed and consumed and grown and all that kind of stuff. So that's what we're going to dig into, and we're going to dig into it from various angles, because we kind of want to give you this overall theme of looking back and rescuing these old-timey varieties and traditions and cultures, but also looking forward to like the youth of tomorrow, the different food preparations we can do with these things, and really be forward thinking by standing on the shoulders of these giants that came before us. And so hopefully you'll see that theme as each of us speaks to our little part of this project, but it really is a deep collaboration, and we spend a lot of time together whenever we can, even though we're spread out geographically. Whenever we do come together, then collards are usually what we're talking about. So to give you the straight up plan, I'm going to pass you over to Bonnetta shortly, and Bonnetta's going to give you a kind of a little bit of her own history with collards and exploring some ancestral stories, and then looking to her work with youth, which is really important. And then we'll share a little bit of a family recipe with you. I'm going to jump in and talk a little bit more about the varieties. I've got some show and tell and some of the collard varieties back here, and we'll talk about how we're working with these varieties to really be climate resilient and forward thinking in terms of developing varieties and the heirlooms of tomorrow. And then we're going to wrap up with Gabrielle, who's going to come in and share some of her own stories and have a little bit of a focus on pot liquor and some of the awesome things she's been working with around that. And then we'll have a little bit of time at the end for Q&A. So either save your questions or put them in the chat, and we'll have some time at the end. But really, in case I forget to say it at the end, this is an invitation to be a part of a bigger collard community. And so I hope this is like a door that we're opening for you, and not just a single event where you're going to pop in and we'll never see you again. So with that said, I'm going to pass it to Bonnetta, who's going to jump into some collard stories.
So, hello, how are you? I hope everybody's feeling great. I see wonderful people from all kinds of cool places. I'm looking at how you're using collard, and they remind me of many stories that I have to tell. My family is from South Carolina and North Carolina, and collard greens were something that were always there. I never knew it was a big deal until I joined this project. And then I realized that for many people like my family, the stories of collard were kind of lost. And so because of our dear Mama Ira Wallace from Southern Exposure, we began a process of waking up these stories. And what we found is some yumminess, some deliciousness, also some sadness, some grief at loss, but also some amazing stories of resurrection and recollection. So my family came here from somewhere in Western Africa, probably in the early 1700s. I have dates back to 1710. They were farming in South Carolina. And of course, there were always greens. Why greens? Well, greens are something that are in every table, and they represent dollars. They represent money, wealth, and success in many African American communities. And of course, during the holidays, they're always on the table, and they represented always Thanksgiving, Christmas dinner, New Year's dinner, and on through the winter. It wasn't until I was adult I realized it was because those collard greens were the last man standing in the garden after everything else had been, put to sunder by the cold weather. Collard greens were more delicious, more yummy than anything else. So in my discovery of my own seed heritage, I came across some stories that were enlightening. And we like mixed greens, but collards was always the base. Somebody in the chat mentioned tree collard. My family, in efforts to free themselves from the Jim Crow of the South, escaped to California. That's where I grew up. And we grew all the greens. And one of the greens that was forever there was collard. There were collard trees always, and we ate greens every day, some type of greens. I'm gonna throw green beans in there. There was greens on the table every day. It wasn't until just recently that I realized that collard green trees are not something that's known to every region. But for all of you who may have discovered some heirloom collard tree seeds, we're looking for them. Right now, I think there's about 120 plus varieties that are somewhere within our collection of seeds. We're looking for seed storage, we're looking for recipes, and we're looking for seeds that your family may have been stewarded over the time. So let me tell you a little bit about collard greens. So there's a question you've heard about braiding seed stories and the stories that maybe seeds were braided into the hair of children. Well, I'm going to tell you those probably were not collard greens. Because if you tried to braid some collard greens in somebody's hair, they're very small. They probably fall out. It works much better with black-eyed peas, watermelon. They're bigger seeds. They're easier to braid. So we came to understand that most of the greens that we have, that we use in the Deep South, our enslaved ancestors were able to forage for local seeds, and they were able to find seeds that were kind of discarded by European settlers who weren't satisfied with the way their kale and other European seeds did well. And our ancestors bred those collard greens into what you have now. So actually, at this point, if you travel back to where our ancestors came from in West Africa, you probably see there's a lot of collard greens there. And I found that out, also, in Angola, which was one of the first places where Africans departed Africa, they got collard green stories too. But collard greens are really an African-American crop. They're bred in this country. So let me tell you a little bit about what happened to some of those collard greens when they went back to Africa. So one of the things we realized was that in the western part of Africa, in many regions in Africa, there was something called the tsetse fly. There was a fly that infected large animals, particularly hoofed animals, and so they were not able to survive in West Africa. You probably heard about the stories about malaria as a plague, and so pork, which is usually the thing that's used to season greens in the United States, was not available. So what did people use? They used dry fish, they used stocked fish, they used shrimp and any kind of dry fish. If you visit West Africa today, anytime about this time of day, the fishing lines are being pulled in. People take those fish, they cook them right on the spot in the beach, serve them in restaurants right there, and many of the seafood is dried. And if you've ever been to a Nigerian restaurant, a Senegalese restaurant, that flavor that you taste, the back taste, is the taste of either stockfish or smoked seafood that is used as the basis for flavor. So let me tell you about Mimi greens. That's what we call them. So many years ago, my family adopted a family from Niger, West Africa, and they taught me some traditional methods. So we kind of combined our southernness with our West African heritage and came up with this recipe called Mimi greens. And what is that? It's a one-pot dish because stews and one-pot dish are the answer to many traditional communities. And what you do is you take what I'm calling an African sofrito. So we use onions and garlic, tomatoes and peppers, and make a sauce with that. And what you do to make it African is to drop some ground nuts in there. So that could be either ground nuts, which is like bambara bean, or you could use peanuts. That's going to make amazing sauce. You cook that down, and then in another pot, you've steamed your greens. What you're going to do is you're going to throw those cooked greens over into that delicious, yummy sauce. It has all kinds of wonderful things in it. It needs a Scotch bonnet, but if you can't take it, use ajo dulce, which is similar seasoning pepper, but doesn't have the fire and the kick that Scotch bonnets have. You cook that low and slow, and what that sauce is going to do with the ground nuts in it is going to tenderize those greens. You serve that over some rice. Now, traditionally, that rice would be broken rice or an African rice that comes from West Africa. And now, in many places, the favorite rice might be jasmine or other kinds of rice, that fragrant rice. And that isn't a complete meal. We call that Mimi greens. And so if you're ever looking for something really delicious, now I didn't mention that you throw everything but the kitchen sink in to season that. So you're going to have everything up there. You can imagine all your thyme and oregano, all your fresh basil, every single thing in your kitchen. When I make it, I use about 25 different ingredients. And because I grew up in California, I'm sorry, I have to use some non-plar fish sauce, goes in everything I cook. But it's going to be delicious. It's going to be yummy. It's going to be tender and have its own gravy. And make sure you check to make sure people are not allergic to peanuts, because you actually, when you cook that sofrito, you're not going to even be able to detect the taste of peanut butter, but you're going to detect the taste of yummy. It's going to be good. So I want y'all to try that recipe, and you can look for Chris, I believe it's on the Heirloom Collard website. Go crazy with it, enjoy it, love it, and tell us more. We are collecting your recipes, so please submit those to the Heirloom Collard Project. And if you want to join our merry band of growers, chefs, and enthusiasts, we need all the folks in the world. We're looking for stewards that can help us take care of this crop. Chris, am I still talking about our youth programs?
Yeah, I'd love it if you could speak a little bit to the Collard for Kids stuff.
Okay, so what happened is you see us grown-ups, we meet every month and we get together with wonderful stories and pictures and artwork and all this about collard greens. And what we decided to do is that we needed to reclaim that heritage of seed farming. And one of the things that's required is keeping data. We use some data software. But we realized the people who are probably really good at keeping data were not a bunch of old farts like me, but probably young kids. So we came up with the idea that we shouldn't wait till people get grown to teach them seed breeding. We should start with our youngest growers. So in the case of Seymour and Ujamaa, our youngest growers are 3 and 4 year farmers who are in the Montessori programs learning agriculture. So we have young people from 3 years old all the way up to high school kids who are in agricultural programs. And they are learning how to breed seeds in a project we call Collards for Kids. And so Ujamaa is made up of a bunch of working groups, a bunch of enthusiasts, people who just step forward to work and just want to get things done. And they have created lesson plans and all that teach the art of seed breeding, observation, selection, for color, for taste, for pests, and all the things you need to learn in order to be a really good seed farmer. So I am so excited to know that we have 14 schools from Berkeley to Wisconsin to Kentucky to Massachusetts. Yeah, we got schools in Massachusetts growing collard greens as we speak today. And the idea is not only will they learn how to grow, but they'll learn how to breed for all the wonderful things we talked about, like taste and pest resistance, but also for climate resiliency. And so what we hope to do is to not wait till they don't want to get their hands in the dirt. Start them early, and let's get them busy learning the science of seed breeding. And as you know, farming, it's not rocket science, but actually it is science. And so we want our kids to be comfortable with that. And so we hope that you will join us. If you have an inclination to become a seed steward, you can sign up on our Heirloom Collard website to be a person responsible for making sure that those rare varieties come back into circulation and are made available to future generations. And I think that's about it, right, Chris? Does that cover it? I think it did.
That's it. Yeah, that's actually a really good jumping off point for me to join the conversation, because I want to actually zoom back a little bit and talk about some of the origins of this collection that you've been referencing and how we got to a point where we're able to start working with the children and move forward from there. So some people may have heard this before, but I think it's worth reiterating, because to me it's a really powerful story about both seed preservation and some of the mistakes that we can make with seed preservation in terms of saving the seeds and maybe not putting as much attention into the people and the communities that work with those seeds. So to give you, this is going to be like the shortened version of this story, but basically some really great folks that we still work with today, about 20 years ago, including a USDA collard geneticist, realized that there wasn't very much collard diversity held within the USDA. The USDA has these seed banks where they collect and store lots and lots of different varieties of lots and lots of different crops. And often those varieties are used in breeding projects to develop new varieties and look for disease resistance and lots of important work, if we're being honest with ourselves. And there wasn't very much collard diversity in the seed bank. And so this pair of geographers were looking for a project to kind of survey the South, and they met up with this geneticist and basically ended up coming up with this project where they drove all over the South. And what really happened was that they were just looking for collard patches. And whenever they saw a collard patch in someone's back garden, they'd pull up, go and knock on the door and say, hey, I noticed you're growing some collards. Can we talk to you about your collards? And most folks were like really, really receptive to this and excited to talk, and ended up sharing their seeds. I think of like the almost 100 people that they spoke to, only one person didn't share seeds, and they were shared willingly and graciously. And so it was a kind of a fun, interesting story of these folks that were driving around the South. And a cool component of this is most of the collard diversity they found was in eastern North Carolina, and they ended up defining what they called the collard belt, which kind of went from just over the border into South Carolina and up into Virginia, but mainly eastern North Carolina is where all these varieties came from. So some things that are important about this collecting trip. One is the average age of the seed keepers was in the 70s. So these were elderly seed keepers. Another thing is most of the seed keepers reported being really grateful for these people saying, we will kind of preserve your seeds, because they didn't have anybody to pass those seeds on to, for the most part. So we were seeing this situation where elderly seed keepers with varieties that were very special or unique didn't have anyone to pass those seeds on to. And there was a very real risk that these varieties would be lost. And we wouldn't even know that they'd been lost, because these weren't documented in, academic journals. They didn't make it into magazines or seed catalogs. These were literally just seeds of the people, grown in the communities by the people, because if you wanted to eat collards next year, you had to save collard seeds. That's the way it always was. But as those seed keepers aged out and there was no, inheritance, then those varieties could have been lost. So a very, very important service happened by preserving those varieties. But the thing, my critique, if I were to offer one, would be that those seeds were then boarded into the USDA, which preserved these varieties. And for, 10 to 15 years, those varieties didn't do all that much apart from sit in the USDA. So they'd been saved genetically, but as a culture and as a community and as a cuisine, these collards weren't doing what the collards were meant to do, which was to exist with the people. And so Ira Wallace, who's our matriarch and is, I think, infamous, and everyone should know about her. So go and look up Ira Wallace if you don't know her already. She was lucky enough to see a collard trial that was happening in Charleston, South Carolina, using these varieties. And there were about 60 of these varieties growing out. And Ira Wallace has been seed saving for a long time and deeply loves collards. And she walked into this collard trial and was just astounded by the diversity of collards. And so if Ira Wallace was astounded by the diversity of collards, then there was some crazy diversity of collards going on in that field. And she tells it, or the way she tells it is that she walked into that field and she looked at all this amazing, beautiful diversity and just had this kind of like real strong feeling that we had to do the work to get these collards back into the communities and back to the people. So it was almost a reverse engineering where the collecting trip had saved the seeds and put them into the USDA. And now the Heirloom Collard Project is pulling them out of the USDA and working with lots of great partners and collaborators to regenerate those seeds and then return them, rematriation may be a term, to get those seeds back into the people in the communities. So that's the kind of concept of the Heirloom Collard Project and what we're trying to do. And we have all these beautiful varieties that we call singletons. There's a few on my poster up here. But one of the challenging questions is, how do you get seeds to be reintegrated back into a community when all of the, you know, the seed saving infrastructure and the cultural knowledge and practices have been eroded over the last 100 years through lots of problems like industrial agriculture, commercialization of seeds, you know, the rural urban transit, and just lots of problems have undermined our ability to exist within these kind of like macro regional food systems as communities. And even just community as a concept has somewhat been eroded in recent decades and maybe centuries. So we really want the Heirloom Collard Project to be this project that isn't just sending seeds back into the ether. We're working with education, and as Bonnetta said, seed stewards and the youth, education, academia for sure, crop trials. We're really trying to like take this whole systems approach to make sure that when these seeds go back to the communities, there's people that can continue to steward them and share them, and that we won't maybe in 50 years be back where we started, where the seed keepers of today are aging out and they have no one to pass seeds to. That's the problem that I think we really need to address, as opposed to just preserving seeds to save the genetics. So part of the way we've done that is by doing big trials where we've really tried to get people to experience these beautiful collards. In 2020, we did a national trial where we had a few hundred people were sent 3 varieties of a collection of 20 collards and invited to grow them out and give feedback back to a central organization. So we ended up with just like a lot of enthusiasm and buzz around people growing all these beautiful different varieties. And we had 8 trial sites across the country that were able to grow all 20 varieties, and they were mainly farms. And the Utopian Seed Project here in Western North Carolina was lucky enough to be one of those farms. So we grew all 20 varieties. And because collards are awesome, we added our own, we snuck in a third one. So we had 21, not a third one, a 21st one. So we had 21 total varieties in the field. And again, my post is kind of cut off, but these are all the varieties that we grew that year. And I brought like just examples of, you know, normal, fairly standard white veined ones, but we have like this just amazing coloration going on where we have paler purples and darker purples. I don't have an example of this, but we have some glossy collards. We've got some collards that are going pink and purple leafed. They were at my other farm today, so I'm sorry I didn't bring any of them. We've got different plant structures. We've got heading collards and cabbage collards and frilly collards, and just this like phenomenal diversity that you just don't mentally associate when you think about collards. And so to be able to share them across the nation and have lots of people trialing them was really fun. And we got some good information, and it's helped us push this message out there. But one of the interesting things that happened for us on our farm with our 21 varieties was we did this variety trial. We did taste testings and lots of fun with all the different varieties. But going into the winter of that 2020 year, we were kind of like wrapping up that project, and we didn't really think about those varieties as seed crops. Because one thing you may not know about collards is when they send up a flower stalk and little yellow flowers, those plants have to share their pollen with other plants in order to cross-pollinate. They're called obligate outcrosses. So if I have one variety here and another variety here, it's almost certain they're going to cross with each other. And actually, you have to put about a mile between those two varieties to guarantee that they won't cross. So we had 21 varieties like within a couple of 100 feet of each other. There was no way they weren't going to cross. So we'd made the decision that Seed Savers Exchange and Ira Wallace and the USDA had these varieties nice and secure, and we weren't going to save seeds. But going into that winter, kind of like what's just happened right now, actually, we had a couple of weeks of really warm weather, you know, high 70s. And then we had this crazy Arctic plunge, and it went down to 8 Fahrenheit. And most plants are they're okay when it gets really hot, if it gets really hot slowly. They're okay if it gets cold, as long as it gets cold slowly. But these massive temperature swings, they're no joke. That will really upset a plant. And 8 Fahrenheit even with a slow deterioration to that temperature, is pretty cold for collards. So basically, when I saw that on the forecast and it went from the 70s down to 8 Fahrenheit, I was kind of in my brain just thinking, okay, all my collards have gone to mush. That's the end of the trial, you know, game over type of thing. But when I went to my field after that, like 70 Fahrenheit temperature swing, it was so amazing to walk down the row and see like mushy collard, totally dead collard, maybe not even a collard there. And then like beautiful green collard, mush, green, mush, green, right? All the way down in all the different blocks represented in all the different varieties. There was like survivors, and not just survivors. Some of them were like pretending like it hadn't just gone down to 8 Fahrenheit, like not even like wilty. And so in that moment, I was like, wow, there's this phenomenal genetic difference between mushy collard that I'm not interested in and beautiful green surviving collard that has just survived this crazy temperature event. And so we decided to continue to let the environment select for winter survivors, and anything that managed to get through to the following year, we let go to seed, and they all flowered, obligate outcrosses, so they all shared their pollen. And what we ended up with was about 8 pounds of collard seeds that was an intermix of all of those 21 base heirloom varieties that had mixed it all up. So we had a massive genetic shakeup, but not just a random shakeup, a shakeup of these super tough collards that could survive that temperature event. Plus, we knew they were entirely delicious because we'd been working with chefs the year before. And so we had this beautifully diverse, absolutely delicious, super cold hardy mixed population of seeds. And so straight away, you know, we were speaking to Ira Wallace, and Southern Exposure Seed Exchange agreed to allow us to share those collards through their catalog. And we sold over 500 packets of what we called Ultra Cross collards in that first year. And then Ujamaa have started selling them and distributing them. Experimental Farm Network distribute them. So at this point, thousands and thousands of these packets have gone out the door, and every packet represents something completely different. Every seed will be genetically different. So when you plant these seeds, every collard plant could be anything. And so we view this transition from the heirloom singletons and the beautiful stewardship that we can respect and honor, we're bringing forward and sending these seeds into communities to really empower people to start their own kind of like futuristic heirloom seed story, so that when we imagine ourselves in 100 years' time looking back, then these are the projects and the varieties that we're going to look back on as heirlooms. And it's just a very exciting place to be. And planting these mixes is just I don't know, it's just a joy to see what comes up, because it's always surprising. It's usually delicious. And we're just seeing so many different recombinations and colors and plant shapes coming out of it, that these are the seeds that we're also sending to the schools and the collards to kids, so that they can be making their own selections and picking out which ones they want to grow, and really having ownership and responsibility and authority to take these forward into future generations. And, you know, climate uncertain future generations where this genetic diversity will really serve us in growing food and having food security. So that was my piece about the biodiversity in the middle. I'm gonna pass it to Gabrielle, but I did want to mention, I got flicked. I shouldn't have said I'm gonna pass it. Yeah, I wanted to say one last thing, Gabrielle, sorry. Last week I had a beautiful conversation with some friends of mine, Connie and Millard Locklear, and we talked about the collard sandwich. And I just wanted to give everyone a heads up that there's going to be a video released tomorrow about that conversation, and that I feel like you should all be obligated to make a collard sandwich. If not tomorrow, then sometime in the very, very near future. And all these collards that I harvested, I'm going to share some with a friend, but the rest of them are going to go into my own collard sandwich that I am dedicated to making tomorrow. So that was my last piece. Gabrielle.
That was a perfect way to exit the collard sandwich. Come on. I don't know if y'all are familiar. I was invited to a Lumbee powwow, and that was the first time I ever had a collard sandwich. And I was like, why have I never had this before? I grew up in Central North Carolina. Why has this not been on our plate at any point? So thank you for that. I just want to say I'm having a whole moment right now because I am home at my home place. It's the house I grew up in, the house my mama grew up in. And my mom is here right now. She's visiting. She doesn't live here anymore. And my grandfather is here also across from me. We've been over here geeking out as Chris is talking about these collards with the temperature drop. And I'm like explaining to him what that means because we love that stuff. And also like I learned what I know about collards and about planting and about seed keeping because of my grandfather, who is 87 now, and very casually in conversation, when I can't even remember what year this was, maybe 2015 or 2014. I was home. I was living in Brooklyn at the time. And I came home and saw something strange I'd never seen before tied up under the shed. And I asked my grandfather about it, and he told me that it was collard seeds. And he was telling me about, like, you know, of course, that like opened my world because I never knew that. You know, I knew Pop always kept a garden. I knew my great uncle Andrew, who was his brother, always kept a garden here. But I never witnessed the process of seeing like the collard turn into like the flowering stalk, and then we have the seeds, and now the seeds are drying. You know, to like witness that process was just really beautiful. And so I just want to acknowledge that like all of that, I'm holding all of that with me right now as we're here. I literally probably would not be here in this work if it wasn't for that conversation. That was so casually had. It's just so funny how we can access so much of our history in just a moment, right? With a question that we ask. It could be that simple, and our worlds can be opened up. And that's really been my experience in moving back home and in pursuing work as a preservationist and as a culinary artist. And so since we're talking about the collard, I thought I would talk a little bit about pot liquor, which is one of my favorite things about the collard green. It is the juice that cooks off of the collards. And a few years back, I started, because I co-founded a Black Farmer CSA here in North Carolina called Tallgrass Food Box. And when we started it was cold outside. There was nothing in the ground. So I'm like, this is a CSA. People's coming to get food, but what are they getting? They're getting greens. Happy, happy Friday. Here are your greens. But it was so cool because we had this abundance of greens from different farmers. And I found myself experimenting a lot with collards because we had a lot of collards. And so I started dehydrating the leaves and making tea. I started even using SCOBY to ferment the tea that I was making with the collard pot liquor. And, you know, as a culinary artist, that was so exciting because this is an ingredient I thought I knew my whole life, but to experience it in this whole new way was just like really earth-shaking for me. And so I wanted to draw some attention to the history, right? To this word that a lot of people didn't know. A lot of my peers were like, what's pot liquor? And I think when you say pot liquor, people are immediately like, ooh, like, what's that? Alcohol? And it's like, no, it's actually collard green juice or turnip green juice, or, you know, whatever salad you have out in the yard, the juice that cooks off, which is super nutrient dense and really good for you, and historically used as a remedy for our bodies. Even, you know, my grandfather, like I said, he's 87 years old and he's still moving around like it's nothing. I think in large part because I'll go over and visit him at his house and he'll have a mug of pot liquor on the table that he's sipping, that he rewarmed from his greens. So I felt like it was a part of my, like, I feel honored to be able to celebrate an ingredient like this. And so I started to make pot liquor teas. And what that really was me cooking down. It was two things. I would either dehydrate the leaves, and I would break them down and they would look like green tea leaves. And then I would steep them in water, and I would add different things like cardamom and cinnamon and clove, and sweeten it with a little honey. And I was calling it pot liquor tea, even though it wasn't the traditional pot liquor. Bonnetta, I know you're going to get me on this. It wasn't the traditional pot liquor. We know with the ham hock, the salted pork in there. But the reason I was calling it pot liquor tea is because I feel like it's important that we continue to say these words, that we use this language, that we remember what the tradition looked like and what it can look like in both the contemporary and a historic sense. When we honor these ingredients, I believe that we can honor them in our own way. And so it really has, pot liquor has become a staple for me in my cooking. And right now, currently, I'm working on an intuitive cooking club, because I believe intuitive cooking is, the mother of my culinary artistry. And it's how I learned to cook. It's about feeling your way through the dish and using your senses. And so I have a little snippet from my cooking club that I'm working on, where I use pot liquor in one of my dishes. And if Brian, if you don't mind, if you could play that video. Okay, what are we making? We're making mussels. The mussels are going to be cooked in pot liquor. Pot liquor is the juice that cooks off the greens. They can be any greens. Generally, we're talking collard greens, right? Where you braise your greens down. Usually there's a salted or smoked ham hock or turkey wing that people put in the water to season the broth. You drink that broth off of there when you're not feeling well. That's kind of like an age-old remedy. So I'm doing a vegetarian pot liquor. We're going to use caramelized onions as like our salty umami-ness, and also our miso paste too. So let's get this started. Okay, we're back. Hey, y'all. It's so interesting not being able to like hear y'all or see y'all. So I'm just like, ta-da! Did it work? I hope you enjoyed that. I use pot liquor in a lot of the things that I make. And I love that someone is saying that I'm cooking in my new kitchen. Yes, this kitchen behind me, this, like I said, is our home place. So it's been here for many generations, and I have been able to renovate this space. And I started with the kitchen, of course, because this is the heart of the home. And so, yes, here's a peek at my new kitchen. But I hope y'all enjoyed learning a little bit about pot liquor through my eyes. And Chris, I guess I'll hand it back over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm glad you shared that video. It was really nice to see it in action. I had a question, and this might put you on the spot, but I remember we had a few different collard varieties that you were trying your pot liquor teas with. Did you get anywhere with that? Were you getting different flavor profiles from the different varieties, or was it just all collards?
So let me tell you what happened with that. I did experiment with the Tabitha Blue.
Tabitha Dykes.
The Tabitha Dykes. Aren't they like a bluish tint? Like a
Yeah, they're beautiful.
Okay. Tabitha.
And delicious also.
Ooh, they are delicious. And I just want to say my entryway into cooking like this really, and learning about the West African influence on our cooking here was groundnut stew. So Bonnetta, I just thought about you. And also that collard pot liquor, those mussels, I finished them with dried fish with bonito flakes.
Yes, that would be
And
good.
yes.
That would
So
work. Can I talk about, you kind of went somewhere where children weren't allowed to go. So in my grandmother's kitchen, pot liquor was what was left over after everybody else ate, and that
yeah.
was saved for the chef, for the cook, because mother would give the best of everything to dad and the children. But what was left in the pot was that nutritious drink that was believed that was iron rich, and childbearing women would use that medicinally. So I think it always had a medicinal quality to it. And you're a grown up, but you're still one of the youngest. I guess it's your kitchen, you get to drink it. But as a child, it was a treat. Actually, most people had left the kitchen, and it was part of the cleanup crew got that. So it's wonderful to see new things being done with it. I love the idea of us taking it to another level. And I love the idea of to beat the dikes. Now, can I just say that in our cooking taste test, she came across as one of the most delicious. I think, am I right, Chris? She's one in most of our, we're tasting
I
raw
could see that.
collard greens. Because I think it's because she's so pretty. You know, you think that somebody, because she's pretty, she actually tastes good. So that's what I'm
Exactly.
thinking. But she's gorgeous, and as are so many of the beautiful varieties. If you would like to see those, if you go to the Heirloom Collard Project and meet the collard, you can see that many of them are named after friends and family people who found them. So one of the things we want to do is, by helping to popularize these things, by helping people to want to steward them and want to protect these stewards, please remember that whenever you taste anything that tastes good, one of the indigenous seed keepers is responsible for bringing that forward to future generations. I was talking to somebody who had a PhD in agriculture, and we were talking about the science, but he never learned seed keeping in school. It wasn't taught in his PhD program. So if you really want to know who did this work in the years gone past, it was the indigenous folks that brought you the crops we have in the future. Like I say, maybe grandpa didn't even have teepuses in their mouth. You may know what that is, being from North Carolina. But they knew how to grow out and how to provide for their families. And so as a part of the Heirloom Collard Project, it's an effort that Ijama is very serious about, and all of us, about reclaiming our agricultural heritage, putting the culture back in agriculture, but also helping people understand the role that we have in modern times of making sure that future generations still have access to this yumminess. We're doing college stories, and that's another thing we probably need to talk about, our heirloom college stories. If you have a good granny story, we need to come and interview you and get that story. If you have something that should not be lost to future generations, we do have a method in which we're traveling and we're recording video, and we have the heirloom garden story, which is a project that Ujama's working on with Spelman College and Princeton University to document these stories. Our goal is to have 140 stories that we record. I think we've got 80 so far, and we're traveling, trying to make sure that along with many things, that these stories are not lost to future generations. You know, we started this work because COVID was stealing our elders. So many of them were dying, particularly in poor communities, underserved communities, they were dying. And so we saw the need to collect those stories. And I think Mark and Ed saw the importance of us going back and capturing the people behind the breeding stories, behind that seed. That seed didn't breed itself. It didn't grow itself out. It was someone who took personal responsibility to value that, to steward it. So we're asking you to join our work. You know, we have one foot in the past with the singletons, but we got the other foot in the future with our breeding projects, particularly the ultra cross. So consider joining our effort And I'm sure there's some yumminess in the pot waiting for you.
We've picked up a few questions, which I can dig into a little bit if you guys are ready for it. Okay, so Julia has mentioned picking caterpillars off their collards in the chat. Can we discuss some more pest control ideas? The caterpillars. I've dealt
They're
a lot
wicked.
with this. Do you want me to talk about that?
Hateful and wicked.
They're just
and
hungry
the enemies to my soul some days. But we're fighting. We're in a fight. We're gonna plan enough for us and them too, I think.
I feel like the easiest no spray control is to cover them. When you, if you're growing collards in the summer or any brassica, then they're going to get eaten up by a whole host of different pests, including the cabbage worm. So what we do is when we transplant into the field, we put row cover over them. You can buy remay or floating row cover and just have that physical barrier. And as long as there's no eggs on the collards when you're planting them, then generally that provides a pretty good protection until actually we just pulled our cover off last week because it finally got cold enough that those pests weren't around anymore. And then the collards can grow into the winter. So that's one tactic we use.
Can I just add, Chris, that there is an insect cover that's very good, and it allows it to get the air and the water and everything it needs. So consider doing that. Traditional row cover, I guess, works, but it does block some water and some rain. Please be aware also that that these little whiteflies are wicked also.
Wicked.
And they are mean-spirited little things that like collard more than us, I guess, because they're out there. And that pretty little butterfly that you see flying around in the garden is no friend. That is the cabbage looper. It's wicked. I used to think it was so cute until it ate up, destroyed my collard greens, and I had to cut everything back to the nub. Then they weren't so cute anymore.
I will say now, my Uncle Herbert, which is my grandfather's eldest brother, shared this with me. I never tried it. Maybe you can try it. He said that oak ash, dusting with oak ash is supposed to be a remedy, but usually in the summertime when stuff is really buggy. But if anyone has the time to make ash from oak wood and then dust their collars, please let us know how that works out.
But they don't like clay. They don't like competition, so that would be hard for them. I'm sure there's a lot of home remedies, like people using hot sauce. They're using garlic. Neem is another one that people swear by.
And just for completeness, the one that really works well against the caterpillars is BT, which is an organic insecticide. If you want to look that one up and decide whether you want to use that, but it's very effective. I'm pretty.
I think it works better than neem. Neem is sticky, so that's kind of a good thing. But BT actually says on the label, and it is organically certified, appropriate remedy if you want one.
Okay, so more questions. I've been asked to define singletons. That's just a language that we're using within the Heirloom Collard Project to talk about the single varieties. So Tabitha Dykes or Green Glazed or Morris Heading, we call them the singletons, which are single varieties. And then we have the Ultra Cross, which is the mixed up varieties altogether, where you can, who knows what they're going to become. So that's the two differences. But yeah, really just it's another way to talk about single varieties. For you, Gabrielle, and maybe Bonnetta, how would you describe the taste of pot liquor to somebody that hadn't tried it?
Ooh, it's delicious. It's what's left. So if you think of that sofrito, if you would use it in any way and you let it cook down, so it's what's left in the bottom. So it's mushy, it's onions and garlic and all of that, with that beautiful yumminess from the greens in it. And if you're using a West African variety or a Caribbean, you're going to put like a Scotch bonnet or a hot pepper in there. So it might have some heat to it as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's hard to actually compare it to anything. I agree with Phyllis. She said you can't really describe it. I agree. It's hard to describe, but it is. You get a little sharpness still from the greens. I think like in culinary language, they would call it umami, right? Because you got all these warm, round flavors, salty from the pork. But I don't know if I have a word to sum it up, I think y'all should just make some pot liquor and just sip.
Well, Gabrielle, it actually, it is a bitter. So all of the cabbage and everything in the cabbage family has a bitterness. And so if
Yeah.
you like the taste of any brassica, for instance, if you love those Brussels sprouts, that's a bitter taste. And so I think what we've been taught to think we don't like bitter, when in fact we love it. So some people like those Manhattans and they had little bitters in there. But bitter is another favorite taste in Africa, an important taste. So when you go to somebody's house and they come out to greet you, they'll offer you cola nut. When you taste cola nut, you're like shocked by the level of bitterness. But it's a metaphor for the sweetness in the convening and people being together and hospitality. So bitterness is an important African flavor. And I think we need more of it in our diet. It's probably some vitamin B17 and B19, some things that would probably save our lives if we ate more of it. Also, bitter ball,
Yes.
bitter leaf, all the African crops that have that bitter ball, a kitli, many of them, the healing things have that bitter, strong bitter, stronger than collard.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to start running out of time, but there's one question that I really wanted to get to because I think it's kind of nice for next steps for people leaving this conversation, which obviously could go on for a long time. And it's if people want to start engaging with these varieties or growing this level of biodiversity, then like what are the first steps? What can they do to start doing it? And maybe Bonnetta, you could field that one.
What am I stealing?
Don't steal the collards. That's a different story.
That's another story. Oh my God.
Talking about how people can get
should
involved, like with accessing these seeds through maybe Ujamaa seeds and Southern Exposure and that type of stuff.
Sure. Well, as a part of the 8 or 9 organizations that are part of the Heirloom Collard Club, I guess that's what we are. We love to meet and eat and have fun. But as a part of our work is there are several seed companies in which you can access these varieties. So Seed Savers Exchange, Southern Exposure,
Ujamaa.
Ujamaa. I was thinking of Melissa's.
Working Food.
Working Foods is another one. Ujamaa is our goal is to have at least 20 or 30 varieties. When we grow up, we'll be the collard folks. You can get them from us. Let me talk about 3 different ways we want you to think about collard stewarding. If you have never saved a seed before, we want you to get your hands on some collard, grow them all out, understanding you're going to tie up that spot for 4 seasons. And please attempt to save some seeds, understanding those seeds are precious and are worthy of saving. If you have experience, however, as a grower, if you went through a master gardener class and you learn how to save seeds, or you're an experienced farmer, you've grown collards successfully, we have another program called our Collard Stewards. And so these experienced growers, we're entrusting with about 35 or 40 varieties we have now. We'll send you a small package with 50 to 70 seeds in it with your promise that you will attempt to protect that variety and grow it out for future generations. And so you can get to on the Heirloom Collard Project. But then if you have an institution, we love working with institutions. We have a seed farm at Princeton. Spelman has a Victory Garden. We work with Berea College and UGA and many other colleges. Also, the Federation for Southern Collectives. Many organizations are growing out at their location. And for those people, we send them the Ultra Cross. And what we ask them to do is invite their communities in to see the array of gorgeousness and beauty that exists within this amazing population. And we ask communities, many of our colleges and universities have not done a really good job of interfacing with communities of color. We ask them to open up your doors. What you learn to research, I mean, we ask them to grow out 500 plants. Most small gardeners can't do that, but the university could, or organization, institution could. So you could help to protect these seeds by sharing your knowledge, your growth with the people who live in your surrounding areas. So seed saver, seed steward, and a collaborating partner. Those are the 3 ways that you can work with us.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bonnetta. I'm going to invite Mara back into the room, who I think is going to move us towards closeout. But like I said right at the beginning, this is the invite or the open door. And if you want to continue engaging, then the Heirloom Collard Project, we have the website, we have the Get Involved, you can get the varieties, follow us on social media, and we really want to expand this community to everybody, actually.
What a gift today was. I'm so grateful to our panelists and our hosts, and Chris Smith, Bonnetta, Adeeb, Gabrielle, Eitienne. I am so grateful for you spending this time with us and sharing your amazing collard stories with our Slow Food Network and beyond. It's one of the most active chats I've been involved with in the past. So thank you everybody for your participation. We're so grateful for everyone's attention and wonderful questions. I also want to thank our sponsor for this event, Southern Exposure Seed Exchange. Ira Wallace's group was crucial in bringing this event to you guys today. So thanks, Mama Ira. For more collard fun, it's Collard Week, everybody. So we have all sorts of things happening this week. There's a quote or a link that just got put in there that takes you to the landing page for Collard Week. We've got a bingo card, so you can like challenge yourself to doing all sorts of fun collard activities, see how engaged you can get with collards where you live. There's a name generator so you can select your own heirloom collard name. It's just in the spirit of good fun. All these collards have such beautiful fun names. We decided to create a fun generator. There's lots of resources there, so please go check out the landing page, and then tune back in, follow us on Slow Food USA on our socials. We're gonna have that collard sandwich video for you tomorrow, so we hope you are gonna tune in for that and make your own collard sandwich. We've got the recipe link also in the chat. Check it out. And then for Slow Food Lives, we have a ton of these live events that we've done in the past. They're all archived on our website, and we have a new one coming up that's going to be celebrating our book that was just released in August, The Arc of Taste, which celebrates our biodiversity work in slow food. We are going to have the authors, David Shields and Giselle Kennedy Lord, who'll be joined by a panel of guests Wednesday, December 6th. So put that on your calendar, come back and learn about all these distinctive and delicious foods that we want to keep on our plates forever, and we need your help. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you again, guests. Thanks, audience members. We're so grateful to have you here today. Go make some collards. Go make some pot liquor.